My name is Ms. Dawn. I am going to take you for a wonderful trip to Storyville. I remember my nanny and my mom reading me stories when I was a little girl. It was like taking a magic trip while sitting right there on their lap. Today, we are going to read Little Red Riding Hood and also Goldilocks and the Three Bears. These stories are some of my favorites, and I hope you enjoy them too. So shall we get started on our trip to Storyville? Here we go. This is Little Red Riding Hood. There once was a sweet little maid, much beloved by everybody, but most of all by her grandmother, who could not do enough for her. She gave the girl a hooded cape of red velvet, and as it was very becoming, and she never wore anything else, people called her Little Red Riding Hood. One day her mother said to her, "Come, Red Riding Hood. Here are some cakes and a jug of cider to take to grandmother. She is weak and ill, and they will do her good. Hurry before it grows hot, and walk properly and nicely, and don't run, or you might fall and break the jug of cider, and there will be none left for grandmother. And when you go into her room, don't forget to say, 'Good morning,' instead of staring all around you." "I will be sure to take care," promised Little Red Riding Hood. Now the grandmother lived deep in the wood, half an hour's walk from the village. When Red Riding Hood had reached the wood, she met the wolf. But she did not know what a bad sort of animal he was, so she did not feel frightened. "Good day, Little Red Riding Hood," he said. "Thank you kindly, Wolf," she answered. "Where are you going so early, Little Red Riding Hood?" "To my grandmother's." "What are you carrying in your basket?" "Cakes and cider. We baked yesterday, and my grandmother is very weak and ill, so they will do good and strengthen her." "Where does your grandmother live, Little Red Riding Hood?" "A quarter of an hour's walk from here. Her house stands beneath the 3 large oak trees, and you will easily know it by the hazel bushes," said Little Red Riding Hood. The wolf thought to himself, "This tender young thing would be a delicious morsel and would taste better than the old one. I must manage somehow to get both of them." He walked next to Little Red Riding Hood a little while, and then he said, "Little Red Riding Hood, just look at the pretty flowers that are growing all around you, and I don't think you are listening to the song of the birds. You are walking along just as if you were going to school, and it's so delightful here in the wood." Little Red Riding Hood glanced around her, and when she saw the sunbeams dotting here and there through the trees and the lovely flowers everywhere, she thought to herself, "If I take a fresh bouquet to my grandmother, she would be very pleased." So she ran about in the wood looking for flowers, and as she picked one, she saw a still prettier one a little farther off, and so she went farther and farther into the wood. But the wolf went straight to the grandmother's house and knocked at the door. "Who is there?" cried the grandmother. "Little Red Riding Hood," the wolf answered, "and I have brought you some cake and cider. Please open the door." "You can open it," cried the grandmother. "I am too weak to get up." So the wolf opened the door and went right in. Without saying a word, he walked to the bed and ate up the poor grandmother in an instant, for he had been more than 3 days without food. Then he put on her night clothes, lay down in her bed, and drew the curtains around him. Little Red Riding Hood was all this time running about in the wood among the flowers, and when she had gathered as many as she could hold, she remembered her grandmother and set off again on the path to her house. When she arrived at the cottage, she was surprised to find the front door standing open, and when she went inside, she felt very strange and thought to herself, "Oh dear, how uncomfortable I feel today, and at other times I am always so happy to visit my grandmother." And when she said, "Good morning, grandmother," there was no answer. Then Little Red Riding Hood went over to the bed and slowly drew back the curtains. There lay the grandmother with a nightcap pulled down over her eyes so that she looked very odd. "Oh, grandmother, what large ears you have. The better to hear you with, my dear." "Oh, grandmother, what great eyes you have. the better to see with, my dear. Oh, grandmother, what large hands you have, the better to hold you with, my dear. But grandmother, what a terrible large mouth you have, the better to eat you with. And no sooner had the wolf said this than he made one bound from the bed and swallowed up poor Little Red Riding Hood. Then the wolf, having satisfied his hunger, went to sleep and began to snore loudly. A hunter passing by heard the snoring and thought, "How the old woman snores! I had better to see if there is anything the matter with her." Then the hunter went into the bedroom, walked over to the bed, and saw the wolf lying there fast asleep. "At last I find you, you old beast," he said. "I have been looking for you for a long time." And the hunter suddenly realized that the wolf had swallowed the grandmother whole and that she might yet be saved. So he did not fire his gun, but he took a pair of shears and began to slit open the sleeping wolf. When he made a few snips, he saw the little red cap. And after a few more snips, Little Red Riding Hood jumped out and cried, "Oh dear, how frightened I have been. It is so dark inside the wolf." And then out came the old grandmother, still living and breathing. Little Red Riding Hood went out and quickly fetched some large stones with which she filled the wolf's body, so that when he woke up and tried to rush away, the stones were so heavy that he sank down and fell dead. They were all three very pleased. Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother thanked the hunter, who then returned to his hunting in the forest. The grandmother ate the cakes and drank the cider and began to feel much better. Little Red Riding Hood said to herself that, as long as she lived, she would never leave the path and stray about in the wood alone, and she would always do exactly what her mother told her. The end. And now we are going to read Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Once upon a time, there were three bears who lived together in a house in a wood. One of them was a little small wee bear, and one was a middle-sized bear, and the other was a great huge bear. They each had a bowl for their porridge. A little bowl for the little small wee bear, and a middle-sized bowl for the middle-sized bear, and a great bowl for the great huge bear. And they each had a chair to sit in. A little chair for the little small wee bear, and a middle-sized chair for the middle-sized bear, and a great big chair for the great huge bear. And they each had a bed to sleep in. A little bed for the little small wee bear, and a middle-sized bed for the middle-sized bear, and a great bed for the great huge bear. One day, after they made the porridge is like oatmeal, for their breakfast and poured it into their bowls, they walked out into the wood while the porridge was cooling, so they wouldn't burn their mouths by beginning to eat it too soon. In a village just beyond the forest lived a little girl who loved to run through the long grass picking wildflowers. Her hair fell in golden locks about her shoulders, so everyone called her Goldilocks. This morning, however, Goldilocks wandered too far, and before she realized it, she found herself deep in the shadowy wood. Soon she came upon the Three Bears' cottage. Glad to find a house in the middle of the forest, she ran from window to window and peeked in. Seeing no one at home, she went to the door and tried the latch. Now the Three Bears, who themselves were very polite creatures, never thought that anyone would come into their house without an invitation, so they always left their door unlocked. But Goldilocks, who was sometimes so curious she forgot her manners, opened the door and invited herself in. The moment she smelt the cooling porridge, Goldilocks remembered how hungry exploring the forest had made her. If she had waited for the Three Bears to come home, She might have been invited for breakfast, for they were good-natured bears and hospitable, but instead she decided to help herself. First, she tasted the porridge of the great huge bear, but that was too hot for her. And then she tasted the porridge of the middle-sized bear, but that was too cold for her. And then she went to the porridge of the little small wee bear and tasted that. And that was neither too hot nor too cold, but just right, and she liked it so well that she ate it all up. Then Goldilocks sat down in the chair of the great huge bear, but that was too hard for her. And then she sat down in the chair of the middle-sized bear, but that was too soft for her. And then she sat down in the chair of the little small wee bear, and that was neither too hard nor too soft, but just right. So she seated herself in it, and there she sat until the poor little chair broke into pieces, and down she came, plump, upon the ground. Then Goldilocks went upstairs into the bedroom where the three bears slept. And first she lay down upon the bed of the great huge bear, but that was too high at the head for her. And next she lay down upon the bed of the middle-sized bear, but that was too high at the foot for her. And then she lay down upon the bed of the little small wee bear, and that was neither too high at the head nor at the foot, but just right. So she covered herself up comfortably and lay there until she fell fast asleep. By this time, the three bears thought that their porridge would be cool enough to eat. So they came home to have their breakfast. But things were not how they had left them. Looking into his bowl, the great huge bear said in his great huge voice, "Somebody has been tasting my porridge." Then the middle-sized bear said in her middle-sized voice, "Somebody has been tasting my porridge." And the little small wee bear cried, "Somebody has been tasting my porridge and has eaten it all up." Then the great huge bear looked at his chair. "Somebody has been sitting in my chair." And the middle-sized bear said, "Somebody has been sitting in my chair." And the poor little small wee bear cried, "Somebody has been sitting in my chair and has broken it all to pieces." Then the three bears thought that they should make a further search of the house. So they went upstairs into their bedroom. Goldilocks had pulled the pillow of the great huge bear out of its place. "Somebody has been lying in my bed," said the great huge bear in his great rough, gruff voice. And Goldilocks had also pulled the pillow of the middle-sized bear out of its place. "Somebody has been lying in my bed," said the middle-sized bear in her middle-sized voice. And when the little small wee bear came to look at his bed, there was the pillow in its place, and upon the pillow was the head of Goldilocks, which was not in its place, for she had no business there. "Somebody has been lying in my bed, and here she is," said the little small wee bear in his little small wee voice. Goldilocks had heard in her sleep the great rough, gruff voice of the great huge bear and the middle-sized voice of the middle-sized bear. But it was only as if she had heard someone speaking in a dream. But the little small wee voice of the little small wee bear was so sharp and so shrill that it woke her at once. Up she started when she saw the three bears on one side of the bed. She tumbled out the other side and ran to the window. The window was open because the three bears, being good tidy bears, always open their bedroom window in the morning. Out Goldilocks jumped and ran away as fast as she could run, and never looking behind her. What happened to her afterward, I cannot tell, but the three bears never saw anything more of her. Weren't those wonderful stories? The pictures were beautiful. They were drawn by an artist named Scott Gustafson. Goldilocks and the Three Bears was originally called The Three Bears, written by Robert Southey in the 1800s. That was over 200 years ago. It is believed that Little Red Riding Hood was written by Charles Perrault in 1697. Well, that ends our trip today to Storyville. I hope you had fun. I know I did. It made me a big hungry, though, for some oatmeal. If you would like me to read a story that you really like, please email me at Storyville with Ms. Dawn, no spaces, @gmail.com. I will do my best to read it on the show. Until our next trip, bye for now from Ms. Dawn.